This is not the Bible Reloaded.
Science is interesting, and if you don't agree, you can fuck off.
Using religion to dictate legislation is un-American, but it's happening.
When someone's arguing with me that the Earth is 5,000 years old, yes, I'm smiling.
So if I offend some of you, I don't mean to offend you personally. I may offend some of your ideas, but that doesn't bother me at all.
I'm talking about what the book actually says.
So in this episode, we're going to have a little listen to an interview that was previously recorded between.
I'm very excited.
Between myself and
Jesus
and
God
and
Myra Hindley.
Why were those three things together?
They're all murderers.
Jesus the revolutionary, God the masochist, and Myra Hindley,
the serial killer.
Who was the lesser of the three.
One of the same people, one of the same lesser of the three evils. Nice. Sorry, carry on. Who did you have an interview with?
With Take That Darwin. Deleted.
Take That Darwin. He sounds delicious.
Yeah, I Skyped with him earlier. We had a little conversation all about what he's all about, and we talked about sort of evolution, creationism, and the misconceptions about both, I guess.
Good, I'm looking forward to listening to it.
Okay, we're going to do that now.
Let's do that now.
And then when we've listened to it, we'll debrief.
We may be drunk because we're drinking, and we've got an hour listening, so then by the end of it, we may just be dribbling wrecks, so we apologise.
Huge intro, but for argument's sake, I'll just start now by saying, Watchtower Awakening's 13th episode, actually, we're on, and we're joined by Take That Darwin, or at Take That Darwin, prolific on Twitter. Would you just like to explain to us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do on Twitter?
Hi there, my name's Dal. I am, as Mr. Watchtower said, responsible for Take That Darwin, the Twitter account, and any amount of pain that innocent people should not have had to suffer, but nevertheless, I'm not stopping. My goal is just to highlight some people who have completely misunderstood evolutionary theory. While I'm not a biologist myself, I'm not a scientist by trade, I'm just a groupie, I do have a fascination for people who have strong opinions about science that they do not at all understand, and who are very vocal about their misunderstandings. So, I retweet these people. I say, hey, look at these people. This is exactly the sort of thing that science communicators are going to have to cope with.
Yeah, I'll tell you why I was so interested in this. When I came across your Twitter account, I'd only just set up a website, and the idea of podcasts hadn't yet entered my mind, although I listened to many of them. Because I'm a former Jehovah's Witness, we were just talking about this before we actually got on the recording. I was going to say live on air, but we're not actually live, are we? Many people have said that evolution and Christianity and things like that, everything's compatible, everything can just live in the same world, and I believe that for certain people it can, but I think that they tend to forget that there's a lot of creationists out there, and Jehovah's Witnesses are creationists. It didn't seem to be a battle when I was younger, but it was definitely one of the a huge part of what kind of turned me around, and it wasn't necessarily saying that evolution therefore disproved the Bible, because I already had my doubts about the Bible, but it was more about the dogmatic teachings and the sort of the ultimatums that were given to me when I was younger. It was more about realizing that if the church, or rather the governing body, shall we say, for Jehovah's Witnesses, the governing body, if they were wrong about this one thing, they're probably wrong about certain other things. It at least means that they're not infallible. Does that make sense? So as I started with Genesis and worked my way through the Bible to find out what it was that was right or wrong, the very first thing that came about was creation, and then I just suddenly discovered this evolution versus creationism battle, and that's what started to draw me into critical thinking. So things like your Twitter account has been really helpful for me. How does that make you feel?
Very surprised. I don't get this has been helpful report from people very often, but I do know where you're coming from, certainly. When I began discussing evolution and creationism on message boards 15, 20 years ago even, I was myself religious. I was a Christian, raised Lutheran, and as the conversations progressed with creationists, they began to sound more and more shrill and angry, whereas I simply wasn't getting that sort of vibe from people who had a firm basis in science. There is this air of desperation with creationists. They are trying to defend their fortress here, and that does lead them to certain sorts of argumentation that any reasonable person would avoid.
Yeah. If I just clarify, I obviously came across your Twitter account much later when I was obviously already an active atheist. So what I mean is it's been a really good tool, because what I love about your Twitter account is that you kind of, you do the head bashing so that I don't need to. I can't bring myself to find these things, but yet I love to see the very specific ones that you find, because it's kind of a barometer for things that are going elsewhere. And a lot of people might think that when you're retweeting these people, many Christians will think that these people are exceptions to the rule. And I guess in my area of the world, that may be true, because people either understand evolution, or even if they don't understand evolution, they at least don't also have sort of, a dogmatic aggression towards evolution. They just nothing it. They just kind of presume the scientists are right and just kind of get on with their life accordingly. They don't have a dog in the fight. I've just lost my train.
Which is the only reasonable conclusion, really. That is the only defensible position.
Yeah. It just seems strange to me that people would think that what you're tweeting is exception to the rule. But in America, it doesn't seem to be an exception to the rule. There is a great. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people in America that are obviously they understand things and they look into them. But there have been so many that I've exchanged with on Twitter or I've seen on YouTube. And it is a huge trend. Like, I was just wondering if you being American, if you could just speak to that and just explain to us what it's like on your end of the pond.
Well, the trouble here is that creationism is tied up in political beliefs. Right now, it is a very tumultuous time, as I probably don't have to explain to anybody, in American politics. There's a very passionate, very conservative voice right now, and they have attached themselves to certain planks in this platform. The abortion issue, that is a major talking point. That is something that they define themselves by. Gun rights, that's another one, and often as not, more often than not, creationism as well. That this is just part of their identity, and it is a religious, political, social thing, all wrapped up in this nasty little carbuncle, where they have decided that science is the enemy because it goes against all of their identity there.
Yeah, it seems strange to me that it kind of seems all encompassing as well. Don't get me wrong, our politics is not necessarily better, but there seems to be just as much backstabbing and lying and sort of smiling through gritted teeth as people tell you lies, and I think that's politics the world over. But it does seem strange being over in England that. In America, it seems that if you have a politician that says their position on a single issue, every other position that they are about to take on every single issue. That it just seems strange to me. If somebody brings up abortion, for example, and they say, I'm pro-life, I'm expecting them to say something about guns or large government or anchor babies or like whatever it is that they're about to talk about. I feel like I already have everything I need to know about them in a single phrase, which shouldn't be the case.
It really shouldn't, but that politics over here is incredibly dehumanized right now. It's just about the lines in the sand.
And that, of course, prevents anything from happening, because you end up with this stalemate with presidency versus Congress and things like that. And how can they? I don't understand how they can claim to be doing things for the country and for the greater good if they won't try and find out what the greater good is. They'll just veto anything based on their political ideology.
Oh yeah, we're porked. I'm not going to make any sort of claim to the contrary. There, we are porked right now.
Right. Well, I guess we'll steer clear of the politics, because that could go into a whole other podcast, I guess. But I'll stick to a few questions. What I wanted to know was what's the closest take that Darwin you ever heard or read? So if you've ever actually heard something that is by a creationist against evolution that made you think to yourself, I think they might have got me here, and you've had to go away and try and find out a little something, or has there ever been one?
Well, I do try to give creationists the benefit of the doubt. I will look up their claims, whenever I come across a new one, which is not often. That's something I need to get to here in this answer. But I will look up to see what the primary sources are saying whenever I come across a new creationist argument, and I will formulate a response based on that, because I will research this. They won't, but I will. Now, the maybe, like, back in the day when I first heard of the polonium halos thing, that one was striking. Where creationists say that
I'm not sure what that is.
Well, again, I'm a layman here, but the gist of it is that there's certain signatures of radioactive decay in granite that apparently could only happen if the granite was created instantly by a supernatural being. And the fact of the matter is that the granite formation there is far more complex, and how the polonium halos occurred is in order to explain that to someone, it requires so much more time and so much more depth of knowledge than it does to just say, therefore granite was created instantly by God, end of story. That's the fundament there of the Gish-Gallop technique, where you just spout out 30 lies and then it takes an hour to properly address each one. An
attempt at truth by verbosity. I've had that a lot. You get 12 questions and you say, well, there's a lot to unpack there, and they're just like, so you don't have an answer for everything, therefore atheism fails.
Right, and so the polonium halos thing, that is one thing that it does come across as good on the surface, because you look at this little tiny claim that takes one sentence, and then you look at the vast amount of knowledge that you need to have in order to address that claim and prove why it's wrong, and then you see why creationists they will succeed at times in an oral debate. This is kind of their methodology. Now,
this reminds me when I was much younger, I was very much into sort of I guess sort of popular science, animals. I watched a lot of documentaries and things like that. I was into all that kind of stuff, and when I was younger, I was told quite a number of occasions, because I was always curious about the more interesting stories in the Bible, such as the flood. And Jehovah's Witnesses, like any biblical literalists, they believe that the flood actually happened. And one of the things that my mum thought would be a good a good thing to get me to realise was the fact that sea fossils had been found high up in hills and mountains, and that was proof that the water reached to the highest peaks, as it says in the Bible, which not only means that it had to get above Everest the whole way around the Earth, which kind of that's more water than there is in these parts. But I didn't actually realise why that might be the case, and I just accepted that and thought, well, if sea fossils got that high, that means all the water got that high. And when I was watching a documentary years later, I saw like this kind of geological time lapse of how certain volcanic areas like raise from the sea, and then some of the fossils that were millions of years old, they may well have been bedrock before they were pushed to the top, and I saw like these little clips, and I just thought to myself, wow, geological time, that was like a new consciousness raiser for me when I was younger. Like geological time was something I'd never really considered, because I'd always had this like 6,000-year-old Earth kind of vision.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it's not like they're going to try to teach kids in Sunday school about geologic uplift, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of my point. That was given to me as a so sea fossils in mountain ranges. That proves that Noah and the Ark were floating around, doesn't it? And it's kind of, because they've got the end in sight, they find out what they can use in order to justify that end. Instead of thinking, so how did that happen? Let's find out specifically. It's just another reason to turn towards the therefore God. And then that's it. And it's so vacuous to me now. But when I was younger, I was like, wow, that is impressive. Well done, God.
Mm-hmm. The one trouble with creationists is that they really do just have so few arguments. There's not a lot of fresh blood entering into into their brains. There's not a lot of fresh blood going into their brains. They're all kind of at the tail end of a human centipede here, where these arguments are just sort of flowing into them on down the line, and you answer their first argument, you answer their second argument, and then they ask the first one again, and as a result, you really do become familiar with these creationist claims after a while.
Yeah, you find yourself unpacking the sort of, well, I guess they're not simple concepts if you haven't come across them before, but because they refuse to look into them, the concepts never become simple. So when they say things like, they'll ask you a certain, the world famous that you are continuing to put across is if we came from monkeys, how come there's still monkeys? If you can clear that up for them, and they can actually accept that, which they almost never do, but if you can clear that up for them, they will then say, what? So evolution doesn't tell us where life came from and how it began. And you're trying to unpack this because now they've moved away from evolution, and then they'll say, well, the people also said that the cosmos evolved. So like, where are all the other cosmoses that were worse than this, and it had to evolve? And it's like you hear these things and you're not really sure where to start, because it's so fundamentally flawed that you're not really sure how to tackle that at all.
No,
and certainly not on Twitter.
Tragically true. It is futile to try to re-educate these people starting from scratch on Twitter. Sometimes if there's someone with a misunderstanding that can be cleared up quickly, I do think it's great that there are people who politely reach out to them and say, no, you're wrong about this. You should look into this more. But I cannot endorse the people who do that. I respect them, but I cannot endorse this behavior because it does end up causing them to run headlong into a lot of hostility.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wrote a blog post a long time ago, and you'll have probably seen it because I've attached it to a few things that you've retweeted, but instead of me sort of going through that Twitter debate, I thought if I write a blog post, I can put the link and just write something like observe or something like that, and then I don't need to constantly try and get through the arguments, because I think I've just summarised to the best of my ability in under 1,000 words what I think and what the problems are, and that can just be a little inroad for them, I guess.
And if that helps one person, then that would be amazing. But I wouldn't dare hope. It does sound cliched, like like when people start a charity, like if this just helps one person, I'd love it to help thousands of people. But really, it's partly this whole venture of mine is partly self-indulgence for it's a bit of a hobby, I guess, and I can spout my opinions and find out things from people that I like. But also, I just think if I've joined the movement, so to speak, I'm a tiny voice. But if there's lots of tiny voices, we might actually get somewhere. Mm-hmm. Ideally,
a noble cause. Right, I'm going to move on to another question. Actually, this kind of this question sort of flows into what we were just speaking about. My main issue with people spouting anti-evolution opinions is that they're not necessarily they're formed as if they are a question, but they're not a question. They're just a statement. So if we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? And it's kind of like you can see them just dropping the mic, wiping the dust from their hands, and just walking away. Like it's like, yeah, I showed them, and then you can imagine the creationists all whooping and cheering. I just don't understand it, because if that is a question and they want to find out, then they could find out. They really could. It just freaks me out. Well, like, what's your main issue with this kind of phenomena?
Well, it's disingenuous, isn't it? When they're asking these questions, it is not to say, hey, can you give me an answer? And then sometimes you do give them an answer to what is phrased as a question, and they're like, I never asked you. Why are you telling me this? The fact is that when they...
Keep your atheism to yourself.
When they make these arguments, it's not... or when they ask these questions, as we were talking about, when they ask these questions, it's not a question. It's a shibboleth. It is a cultural identifier. It is basically the equivalent of one of those samurai flags on the back, or a tribal headdress or something. It's not saying, I would like someone to explain to me why monkeys still exist if evolution is true. What they're saying is, I am a creationist.
Yeah. It isn't a real life question where they're saying, okay, evolutionists, proponents, please explain to me why, if we can. And then if you came back to them and just said, well, we're not saying that we even evolved from monkeys, we're saying that, and then you could just sort of give them like a little inroad and maybe a link to something to have a little look at. I have done that in the past, and as much as I don't want to feel like I'm wasting my time, because there may be creationists that are genuinely asking that question, even I, who loves your account, I don't tend to get involved all that much. I might spend one day where I'm having a bit of a giggle fit at evolution and creationism. I might go overboard a little, but then a lot of the times it's just kind of it's almost exhausting. It's like you think that you're not getting anywhere, so you just don't bother. But if there were people that got back to you and said, thanks, now I'd like to know this, you kind of know that you're getting somewhere. But I must confess, I don't think I've ever had that before. I've had it in real life conversation, but not in Twitter.
No, it wouldn't be on Twitter. There's a lot of posturing on Twitter, a lot of lines in the sand, unfortunately. And yeah, when they do come back with another question, it's often like, oh yeah, well, where did the monkeys come from then? Which is, once again, just another way of saying, woo, creationist over here.
Yeah. It's just a flag in the air waving, isn't it? And the trouble is it's not a white flag. it's a flag with a Darwin, and then like the what's it called, the Ghostbuster symbol around Darwin. What's that called? Like the no entry sign, that sort of thing. It's like, no Darwin around here, thanks. But yeah, then they say that, and then the whole point of your account is, ooh, ouch, take that, Darwin. Strange. A couple of episodes ago, me and my co-host Bonaventure, we were talking about the Catholic Church and how it's changed its opinions on certain things, but yet pretended to be infallible and changed certain dogmatic. Certain dogmas, I guess, and one of the things was they used to think that evolution was total shit, and then they wrote a public letter of apology to Charles Darwin, even though he was dead. So now they've gone back on evolution, or rather their stance on evolution. So now they're willing to accept it. So now Catholics in general, if they believe that the Pope is Christ's emissary on Earth, they have to agree with him and think that evolution is okay. Am I right?
You would think so, yes. However, I've run across a lot of creationists, Catholic creationists, in my searches who are saying, well, he's an anti-pope. And I'm thrilled to think that there's such a thing as an anti-pope.
Yeah, and they're all, there's also a lot of Catholics since the paedophile scandal and things like that as well. There's a lot of Catholics that I've heard that are not only creationists still. They claim to be Catholics, but they're the real sorts of Catholics. They're the Catholics that don't follow the Pope. They're the Catholics that want a reformation. They want to separate themselves and be a new kind of Catholic. And you see this schism happening right in front of your face in it happening in real time. And what I sort of imagine that it's happening in real time right here for us. We've seen them backtrack on things like evolution. And within our lifetimes, I think we'll see them backtrack on things like gay relationships and gay marriages and things like that. That will probably happen once more people come around to the idea. And if we can see it in our lifetime, I can only imagine what they used to get away with when they were above the law.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing is that when the Catholics said, "Hey, Darwin, you're right," that was an exception. Most of the time, in my experience, when a religion is forced to step away from certain dogmas that have become untenable, there's no admission of fault. It's just, yes, this is what we've always believed.
Oh, yeah.
We've always believed that the Earth goes around the sun. What are you talking about?
Okay. Two things there. One is, I think, in my eyes, the evolutionary theory has officially put Catholics to bed, because if they accept evolution, which they do, it means that there was no Adam and Eve. If there was no Adam and Eve, there was no original sin, therefore no point in the church. So I think we can just throw that to one side. The second thing was, when you just said that about there's no admission of fault. In my own experience with Jehovah's Witnesses, when they are at fault and they change one of the teachings, they actually get away with it by quoting a scripture. I can't remember exactly what the scripture is, but they basically say the light gets brighter towards the end days, and because they believe that they're living in the end times, whenever they change anything, it's simply because now they're getting closer to the end. God is revealing more of His holy light. I mean, have you ever heard anything as disingenuous in your life?
Well, yeah, and creationists would love if that were the case. If they could declare that that we cannot compromise with evolution. That is their goal, is to declare that Christianity is completely incompatible with evolution, because that is what makes them feel special. Now, of course, there are many Christians who do accept evolution. There are Christian biologists out there. Mary Schweitzer, for example, who is working hard to promote further knowledge of evolution, and whom creationists love to point to and to say, this person is one of us. She's discovered the unmineralized soft tissue in T-Rex bones, and she's enormously frustrated with the fact that creationists have tied her faith to something this poisonous.
Yeah, a lot of creationists that I've seen on Twitter, either via you or just in general, they do seem to see this creationism. This it is a religious thing, and evolution is of the devil, or evolution is, or it's just like a made up fallacy by human people who aren't following God's will and have turned against it. But then we get down into the different factions of Christianity, what they believe and why they believe it, and all we can really do is go down to their book and sort of speak to them specifically about what they're talking about. But it just gets down to that no true Scotsman fallacy, doesn't it? Where it's just well, they're not the real Christians. It's entirely frustrating.
And that they're happy to exclude large groups of Christians from their religion, the true religion, true Christianity, because the smaller their group is, the more cohesive it is, the more oppressed they can feel. And I'm afraid that is the sort of thing that they feed on, is this notion that they are unworldly, they are hated by the world.
Yeah, which is very true of Jehovah's Witnesses, which obviously is my background. Before we got onto recording, we were talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, and I said that they also call their religion the truth, capital T. So which that irritates me, because they say it so often that it becomes the truth to them, because they say it so often, so they can say it without irony, without a raised eyebrow. So they will sort of meet another brother or sister, as they will call each other, and they'll say, "How long have you been in the truth?" And it isn't really it isn't really a qualifier. It's just what it is. It is the truth, capital T. That's kind of excluding not just like Catholics, but every form of Christianity other than their very specific version with their very own translation of the Bible and their very own hierarchy.
Let me tell you, Mr. Watchtower, I am terrified of people who think they've discovered a capital T truth.
Yeah, it's the most sinister sort of path to totalitarianism I've ever heard. The truth, which kind of, it leaves all debates out, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, I've got the truth, and you're like, well, prove it. Well, it's the truth. You accept it or you don't.
Orwellian.
Yes, creepy. Right. Okay. I'm aware that I'm going to be keeping you for too long, so let's crack on through. I'm going to give you another question. I don't know everything about biology. I'm not a biologist, as are you. We're both fanboys. We like to sit on the sidelines and check out evolution from a distance and sort of guide people towards it, knowing that we don't know every single detail. But any single detail that I need to find, I can find everything I need to know about it from credible sources. So every question that comes up, I know that I can go and ask a specific person who will specifically be able to tell me the gradual, layered parts of information that I can just about get my head around because I am a layman. With creationism, it feels like it falls at every single hurdle for me, and it's just not logical. So with that in mind, and based on your obsessions and stuff and what you do on Twitter, why do you think creationism or creationists think that creation is more reasonable?
Well, that's actually a bit of a loaded question, because do they really feel that creationism is a more reasonable position than evolution? Did they reason themselves to that conclusion? In my experience, creationism is, they accept it on faith. They believe that evolution, similarly, is accepted on faith. They think that that both viewpoints are roughly equivalent ideas, that they have their bearded godly figure, we've got Darwin, they've got their holy text, we've got the origin of species. They maintain, how many times have you heard from creationists that you just believe in evolution. You have to have faith. That evolution is a religion. I'm finding innumerable people who are saying these sorts of things.
You have to have faith because you weren't there for the entire duration of evolution.
One of Ken Ham's favorite arguments there. Now, it's not so much that they see creationism as more reasonable. They have chosen it because that is their side. They've drawn that line in the sand. There's the good guys on the one side, there's the bad guys on the other, and they're mirror images of each other. They've chosen the side that's going to get them to heaven.
I didn't realize when I formulated the question, I did say, why do you think creationists think creation is more reasonable? And you're right, I didn't really realize when I put that question together, but it's the old saying that you can't reason somebody into something that they weren't you can't reason somebody out of something that they weren't reasoned into. So if you accept something dogmatically and you have accepted the truth, capital T, it's kind of, it's an emotive thing, isn't it? It's in your bones. I now accept this to be true. So showing them reasons away from the truth, capital T, there are no reasons if you have found the truth. It's all a bit creepy.
It's tremendously terrifying.
Okay, next up. So there's other accounts like you that have been coalescing in a convergent evolution kind of way. I know there's like Theory Fail and Take That Science, I think. There's Take That NASA. There's quite a few knocking around.
Take That Earth, Take That Etymology, so on, yes.
Yes, so there's kind of like an online community happening, and I wanted to be part of it because I wanted to sort of get a voice out there. What does that kind of activism sort of mean to you?
Well, I would hesitate to call it activism. I've known some real activists in my time. I had a sociology professor named John Subedi who was thrown into a Turkish prison for 6 months after having protested human rights violations. So that man, in my eyes, typifies the activist. Our goal, I think, is a little more modest than activism. I am not an activist. I am a guy who tries to shine a little light into the darker areas, because in darkness, that's where stupidity can grow. And I don't think that I'm necessarily curing that stupidity. I think that if I am having any sort of positive effect, if the other, take that style accounts are having any sort of positive effect, it's to show how bad things can be in order to persuade your more traditional science educators and science communicators to say, wow, okay, this is something that should be addressed. And there are those who use my account and other accounts like mine to try to establish a dialogue, often futilely. I mean, there's often no way you can reach these people, but there are people who have reached out and tried to convince some folks that they're wrong, and they have in fact made a difference, a small difference, certainly. But
I think I think your account has I would call it activism in the fact that you are actively doing something, and if that is pulling people out of the rabbit holes to hold them into the light so that people can see what's actually going on in places where this thing might not be very common, it kind of exposes how worrying the dogmatic mentality can actually be, and how rooted they are in their sort of science denial and things. So I think if you're a tiny voice, like I'm a tiny voice, I think it's just a general kind of consciousness raising that's even though it's very incremental. I don't think you'd actually change the mind of anyone that you retweeted, and I don't think that many people would change their mind if people got involved, like I've got involved a few times. But I don't really do it to change that person's mind. I do it because I know that there may well be people watching, and that's what I did for a long time when I was younger. I sat on the sidelines and I watched the arguments, and I realised, like you said earlier about you realise that the sort of the proponent, the people that were sort of understanding an evolution and trying to put their point across, you realise that it was in like a sort of a very factual kind of, it's kind of disarming, isn't it? If it's pragmatic and it's just straightforward, you know that it's a reasoned argument. But then creationists they more often than not tend to get emotional because it kind of attacks their emotion. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, yes, and I think that creationists aren't doing themselves any favors by tying their religious belief to counterfactual claims about the way the universe works. You can tell though that they are evangelizing, because that is what they launch into. Immediately after their arguments about science fails, it's all about, well, let's talk about the future of your soul. You don't really hear scientists say that sort of thing.
yeah, because there's a throughway, isn't there? That it's trying to I can't remember what that fallacy is, but when you sort of, you have the end in mind, and you know where it is, you know where you want to go. You're not sure how you're going to get there, but you know you're going to end up there, and that's not what science is about. Science is an understanding of the world that we know to exist, or even if we don't know it exists, it's the only kind of we can only tell it exists with our detecting mechanisms. So we use them to try and figure out to the best of our ability what actually is real life, as opposed to what we want it to be. That makes sense, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. But do you want any parting thoughts before we say our goodbyes?
Only this, Mr. Watchtower, I really appreciate this opportunity to ramble on, as I am wont to do. I'd like to say not only, hey, everybody out there, but also you can find me on Take That Darwin on Twitter, and it has been a pleasure.
Okay, thanks very much. I guess we're going to cut now away to myself and Bonaventure, and we'll sort of deconstruct what it was we were just talking about. Thanks for being part of the show. Unlucky, episode 13. I think it was unlucky if I was superstitious at all, but I'm not, so we're just going to call it episode 13. Okay, so thanks for your time. I may well try and drag you back on the show in the future, and in between, you'll just see me sort of, skulking in the corners of your retweets.
What a guy.
Yes. What a guy. That would Take That Darwin, everybody.
What a
yeah,
guy.
Round of applause to Take That Darwin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You suck. No, he doesn't. He was, yes.
I loved his accent.
Yeah. I think he lives in North Carolina, but I don't think he's originally from there. So he has a strange accent.
I like it. I like his accent a lot.
He sounds like Jake from Hugo and Jake of Bible Reloaded if Jake's balls had dropped.
Gosh.
True story, that.
Gosh.
I even tweeted it a little while back when I heard him on another podcast with Adam Reeks.
Good. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So, any thoughts?
What a guy. He's interesting. He's really interesting. And I like the fact that he's sort of like, you know, I'm not a professional. I'm just like a bystander, just watching the party and commenting on it, you know. But yet he knows his stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I wish I did a podcast with him, is what I'm saying to you right now.
Yeah. Sorry about that. He
need to lodge you. Tweet me.
He kind of reminded me of like, you know, when Stephen Colbert says about he shines his truth torch, and wherever it shines, that's what he illuminates, and that's his job. Well, obviously Stephen Colbert's saying it and he's taking the piss, whereas like Take That Darwin kind of does that for real. He just sort of like says it. They go so far down the rabbit hole they don't know which way is up, and he kind of drags them out into the light and shows them. Yeah, this is where it is. And he
definitely
even though
knows
they won't
his
listen.
stuff, and I know the fact. I like the fact that when he says, you know, if someone brings something up to him, he just goes away, he does the research, and then he finds out that it's horseshit. You know, he's one. And then the fact that he sort of kind of laughed and he went, you know, I do my research because they won't. You know, like that to me, that just epitomises the whole argument that every one of us has every day. We do the research, we look into it, we hear something, we go, really? And then we go away.
We said that a couple of podcasts ago, didn't we? Where you said, oh, I'm just one of those people who I think to myself, what? And then I go and have a little look.
Just have a Google.
You don't stand there with your hands on your hips and your Bible to the sky, just sort of screaming about how you know everything there is to know, including the mind of God.
No, I don't know that.
No, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have noticed it because of my masterful editing skills, but there was actually a bit of a nightmare that we had with that audio recording. So something that I had to completely cut was something from jw.org.
Okay. Is it about window cleaning?
No, it's not. But we have spoke about that before, haven't we? And you were like rejected.
I reject the window cleaning thing.
I was talking to the religious tourist about that. I mentioned that you were like, nope, that's not a thing.
It's not a thing.
And it is a thing.
It's not a thing.
I know you don't think it's a thing, but if you go onto jw.org, onto the main page, it says how would you how to enjoy your work. And I think what they're getting at is how to enjoy your work. You enjoy your work because you secretly hate your work, but it doesn't matter because whatever you're doing is giving you the time and money to go and preach the word of God, and that's the part that's important, not your work.
Okay.
Yeah. And lo and behold, the picture next to the how to enjoy your work is a guy window cleaning.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Nope.
I might have to I think if this goes on much longer, I think I'm going to invite Secular Lad on for a 10-minute interview about window cleaning, and then you can just see it.
Yes. Can I be there to interview with him because I reject it completely?
Yeah. Well, I'll have to go in because we'll have to do an extra Jehovah's Witness round at some point,
definitely.
won't we? We've had an evolution go.
I worry that if in that issue I'll just sit there going nope, all the way through.
Yeah,
because everything you tell me, I just go, nope, sorry.
Because he seems quite a nice guy, and he'll just think that you're really rude, but it's not. It's just that you're that you're in denial.
Yeah, I am in denial. Nope. Sorry, that never happened. Sorry, you were saying about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Because we've just done creation and evolution. This is part of the Questions Young People Ask series, and I've done a few YouTube videos on it. So I was thinking of maybe doing a little bit specifically about creation and evolution. And the good people at jw.org have even turned this into an MP3 file. So I'm going to play this, and let's just turn that bad boy up. I'm just going to play this, and this is basically talking about the 2 reasons that you have, or the young people have, to question evolution, like if you're in a school format or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah?
I'm ready.
2 reasons to question evolution. 1. Scientists don't agree on evolution. Despite decades of research, scientists have yet to come up with an explanation for evolution that they all can agree on. To think about. If scientists can't agree on evolution, and they're supposed to be the experts, are you wrong to question the theory? 2. It matters what you believe. If life came about by accident, then our lives, and all the things in our universe are meaningless, says a boy named Zachary. He has a point. After all, if evolution were true, life would not seem to have any lasting purpose. On the other hand, if creation is true, we can find satisfying answers to questions about the purpose of life and what the future holds. To think about, how would knowing the truth about evolution and creation make a difference in your life?
Okay, so
Nope.
rejected.
Rejected.
Yeah, rejected. Okay, so just a summary. The two things were: scientists don't agree on evolution, and two, it matters what you believe. So I wanted to get these across because this is obviously from jw.org. So because my background is I used to be a Jehovah's Witness, this is something that sort of that I've noticed when I've been venturing on their site. But this is a reduction of almost all of the creationist arguments, which is, one, they'll say, well, there's a lot of scientists that don't agree with evolution, so there isn't scientific consensus. I notice on this, just like every question young people ask, they don't actually give you any kind of they don't give you any statistics, no facts, no studies, nothing.
No.
They don't tell us like they create as if it's like a 50-50 argument. They never do anything where they say like they'll tell you exactly how many scientists, and the scientific consensus is so overwhelming that the vast majority of scientists are actually on board with evolution.
You know how I like to be on board.
Or rather, they understand evolution. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah.
The scientists that don't, the scientists that cry about not being able to get their work peer reviewed, they're in such a minority that it's ridiculous. I'm not saying that means that they're wrong. They're wrong on scientific grounds. Yeah. But I just like they're just pissing into the wind against the vast majority of the scientific community.
They're just pissing into the window.
Yeah, and when it also, bearing in mind Jehovah's Witnesses are bothered about creation, what they're saying is that scientists can't agree on it. The scientists can't agree. Almost all of the scientists that don't agree with evolution, they kind of do, but they're intelligent design proponents. Yeah. So they say we do agree with evolution, but God did it.
Yeah.
But the part where they say but God did it, that's not science.
Yeah.
So they just need to stop.
Yes.
But that's obviously they're just putting that forward, just like every other creationist. And the second one is one that really pisses me off. One of those things that like has always got to me ever since I understood what evolution was all about. It matters what you believe. So they're saying that after all, if evolution were true, life would not seem to have any lasting purpose. So they're saying, oh well, if evolution's true, there's no point in living.
Yeah, but they're also saying that the only reason to live is to die, to live in the afterlife, which is outrageously ridiculous. Either way you look at it, if you look at it our way, which is make the most of it while you're here because you'll be dead next week, or if you look at it their way, make the most, just sit in this life, live for the end, live for Armageddon, and then something good may or may not happen to you. Like, which one of those options would you take? Live for the now, or like just wait for Armageddon and we'll see what happens?
Well, yeah, that's why it's strange to us, because looking from the outside in, we just see that as utterly ridiculous, because it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, we can give some kind of purpose to a life because we can decide what that purpose is. Yeah. Whereas because Jehovah's Witnesses are end of day sort of Christians, they believe they're in the last days. I was talking with Take That Darwin about the fact that the governing body, every time they change a teaching, they call it the light getting brighter, because they say that more holy light is revealed as you get towards the end days, and that's just like a get out clause for anything that they decide to change. It just freaks us out, but to them it makes total sense, doesn't it? Because it's just like, well, this is giving my life meaning, this is giving my life purpose, and now I know what the purpose of my life is. So if you take that rug from underneath their feet, they believe that they're going to fall on nothing.
I know this isn't going to help this podcast be any shorter, but I reject that these people are just sitting around waiting for the end.
They're not. They're knocking on doors telling people it's going to end.
Yes. Yes, excellent answer. Gosh.
Thanks.
That's not my favourite thing ever.
No. Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that.
Get busy living or get busy Jehovah, and that should be your next t-shirt.
Get
busy living.
Get busy on the field service.
Get busy finding my truth. It's not a euphemism.
No, there's no my truth. It's the truth, capital T.
Oh, can it not be my truth, capital M?
My truth.
Yeah.
My truth.
My truth.
Intonation. I wanted to draw attention to that because that from my background, that is kind of like creationism in microcosm.
Yes.
And that last thing that we just dealt with, that is about like, you know, your meaning of life, that blends nicely towards, beautiful segue towards me pointing our listeners in the direction of the new YouTube video that I just did, entitled Secular Significance, and it's an extract from Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything.
I must tell you, Mr. Watchtower, that I watched that today and it was beautiful.
Thanks very much.
As is your beard.
Always. Puganophile.
Squelch.
Okay, so that was episode 13.
Thank you, Take That Darwin. You were what a guy.
Thanks, Take That Darwin. Next month should be, I'm not entirely sure about this, but next month should be Jen August. Mm-hmm. She's also, you know, she gets about on Twitter, and she was also on the You Without God podcast, like I was last time. So we might be having a little listen or a chat, or let's get Secular Lad in for this window cleaning round. Yeah,
I need to speak to this window cleaner immediately, if not sooner.
Beautiful. Right, that was.
In fact, could you come clean my windows, please? They're a little dirty. I like them dirty.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry, I'm going to clean the windows. Don't. I like them dirty. So that was episode 13.
Indeed it was. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.